Alright, you guys, we're on the ground at Clearview Air Park in Westminster, Maryland. You guys are going to watch me sweat on this one. We're going to bring up the approach plate for one of the most interesting approaches out there. This is the VOR, or TACAN, runway 15 at Martin State in Baltimore. So what makes this interesting? Well, it's a DME Arc, which you've seen on a lot of different kinds of approaches, but unlike basically any other approach with the DME Arc, the final approach course itself is a DME Arc. So whereas you usually see a DME Arc which kind of leads you onto a final approach course, and if I look down at the profile view, you can even see it more. This entire final approach course is not a straight line, it's not a radial or anything like that. If you look at these intersections, Cumby, Gove, Zovap, those are all points along this 14.7 DME arc from the Baltimore VOR-TAC. So basically I need to follow this arc all the way in and make those descents at the final approach fix, etc., down to step down altitudes until I either have runway in sight or I get to the missed approach point, which is the runway, which is also defined as a point on the arc, 14.7 DME on the 060 radial. Alright, so if that's not interesting enough for you, have a look at the missed approach procedure. And we're going to brief all this stuff once we're airborne as well. Missed approach is climbing right turn, 2,500. Okay, so far so good. On the Baltimore VOR-TAC, 068 radial. And Baltimore 11 DME arc, clockwise to Boast intersection, which is the Baltimore 11 DME, and hold. So yeah, you guessed it. It's another DME arc. So once we finish the DME arc to get us onto the runway, we're going to execute the missed, pick up a radial, fly yet another DME arc on the 11th DME this time until we get to the 108 radial at that DME, and that will be our holding fix. Easy, right? So you can see us up here. We have ownership through flight events on Flight Simulator. We'll try not to cheat too much, but we'll call it for situational awareness, but I'll try to stay heads down in the cockpit for this one. But this is where we're located. It's Westminster, Maryland, so it gives us just enough time to kind of take off, get situated, maybe do a quick brief, get all the instruments set up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and shove off, and we'll take off. So we're going to set this one initially. I want to get us, we're on runway 32, I want to get us pointed in the opposite direction so that we're kind of going towards the initial for this approach. So let's just say that what we've been instructed on the IFR here is we'll take off, we'll climb to our altitude, and then we'll start heading inbound towards slope. So I'll give myself somewhat of a southeasterly heading coming off, and we'll climb up to the altitude for the approach. So it'll be a climb to 2006 as we take off. Alright, so here we are. We'll set power. Release the brakes. This, by the way, this I forget the actual length of the runway, but it's one of the shorter ones out there in this part of the country. If you land here, you get a mug saying you landed here. That's one of the big perks of coming into Clearview. Although a little rough coming off the ground, it's a good start to the mission, but luckily we're in the simulator. Alright, so airborne. Set the autopilot. Start the climb. All the way up to 2006. And then we'll set the heading. Climb. And the turn's coming in. Just get that climb on. Alright, so let's get the briefing started. We did a lot of this on the ground, but let's just have another look here. So let's start with the VOR frequency 115.1. Set that, put it on deloc mode. We would listen up for the Morse code if that was coming in. We see that it's come alive here on the receiver. Climb's still looking good. So what we want to do is we want to intercept this radial, the 334 radial, but when we're flying it inbound, so we don't want to have 334 up top, we want to have it down below. So we'll take the 334, twist, get the 334 on the bottom, so that basically this is our inbound course. That 155 heading is going to roughly put us inbound on that radial once we're on it. You see that we're actually pretty close to having intercepted it already. We just need to come a little bit left of that 155. So we'll set down heading about 135. Back outside the cockpit momentarily, so just keep the climb coming. Climb out a little bit. Oops. Delta 6 is where we're up, is where we're headed. And we'll just make it a little bit more of a gradual climb as we get closer to the altitude. Okay. Looks like we're right on our heading, so we can fly that 155. Any deviations will be because of the wind, so we'll get a sense of what that's doing momentarily. Now, it's a DME Arc. Do we have DME on this aircraft? We don't, but the FARs say that I can use my GPS in lieu of that. So what I'm going to do, you can do this if you have a 430 or 530 in the real airplane. You take the big outer knob and you spin it until you get nearest, and then move this inner knob to the right until you get to nearest VOR. So this is what we're going to use. You have the Baltimore VOR, which is what this whole approach is based on. If you see down here, all the radials and the DMEs are based on the Baltimore VOR, which is in the field of BWI. And we're looking for, you have it at 22.1 now, we're looking for 14.7 DME. So we've got about 7 miles to go. So that serves as our DME. Here we are leveling off at altitude, so we can bring the power back to our cruise setting. Momentary break in the rain, break in the clouds, but very much in IFR conditions. Let's continue the brief as we're flying inbound. So we're going to pick up slope. We're going to make a left turn, a 90-degree left turn, which we can read off the head of the VOR. And then we're going to do that turn 10, twist 10. So we'll make the turn and then we'll twist 10. We're basically going to move in 10-degree increments from the 334 radial to our next big milestone is 021 radial, which is this Cumbie intersection. So we're just going to be moving up as we are clockwise on the 14.7 DME Arc. And we can do a quick check with the ATIS. We'll say we're familiar with the METAR from looking at Martin State. We'll pop Potomac 119.0 on our frequency, back up to COM. 119. 0, and that's who we'll be talking to. We can set Martin Tower 121.3 on standby. We've got our altitude. We're inbound nicely. We've got, let's call it about 4 miles to go before we want to start the turn. Now let's start looking at what else can we brief. The notes here: runway 15 helicopter visibility, we don't care. Local altimeter setting not received. We have the local altimeter, that's all fine. All this about increasing visibilities if we don't have altimeter setting, we can ignore. The missed approach we briefed on the ground. Now, the profile view. This is where things are going to get real interesting, because we're looking for Cumbie, which is that first intersection here. And then after that, at the 039 radial is Goes. What happens at Goes, we can actually, that's our final approach fix. So we're going to be looking for Cumbie and Goes, which will identify as radials off the Baltimore VOR for step downs. Right? So we'll make our first step down at Cumbie, second step down at Goes, down to Zovap, etc. until the runway. And the runway itself is going to be our best. Alright, so here we are, 16.5. Let's, the DME Arc is 14.7, as you see here. So let's make our turn about a half a mile before before we get there, so we're almost ready to make our turn to get situated for the arc. So you don't have to do too much heavy math here, right? It's just going to be a quick 90-degree left turn, so we'll read it off the head of the VOR. So we'll turn to 065. We're coming up on it now. We're within a mile of the arc. Let's wait until we're about half a mile away, so right about now. We'll start that turn to 065. So the turn started. Now, let's start setting our radials. So we're just passing through the 334 radial. The next big one will be the, if we're in the turn 10, twist 10, will be 344. So we'll set that in, and let's be smart about this. Let's put it on top. 344 is next. We have 344 up here. And let's check our distance. We should be 14.7. We're just a little bit far away. I'm not going to stress about it right now. We'll just kind of watch, right? The station is off to our right. It's off our right wing. As you can see in the approach, again, right here, here's, as long as we're flying clockwise on the arc, the station is on our right, which means that if we're too far away, we correct for that by coming a little bit more to the right and vice versa. We'll make a small correction. Meanwhile, we're watching the VOR receiver when the needle comes in. We'll do that turn 10 twist 10 again. Just monitoring our distance. We don't want to have that deviate too much more off that 14.8. Ideally, it'd be 14.7, but we're not going to chase too much. Here comes the needle. Once it comes in, we can start a 10-degree turn. Here's turn 10 and twist 10. Now, we're starting to get a little far away. So let's correct. It could be because we, did our turns incorrectly or our math incorrectly or something, or it just could be wind. Changes in wind. Obviously, we're making a big circle, so the wind is going to affect us depending on where we are on that circle. So we'll just not overthink it, right? Let's just try to keep this as close to 14.7 as we can. Now, that little correction we made doesn't look like it's having much impact. So we'll do a little bit more. That's DME Arc, right? Don't overthink it. A lot of people don't like the turn 10, twist 10. They just want to look at that DME distance and say, well, if we get further away, make a right, or make an inside turn, whatever the case is. And we can see that looks like we're correcting slowly, so that's good. We'll hold it. As we come up on centering the needle, we'll start another 10-degree turn. We'll twist another 10. 005 or something. Always monitoring that distance. And we're just a teeny little bit outside, but I'm not going to chase it too much right now. So what's the next big thing that's happening? Again, here's the 021 radial, which we're moving towards at Cumby. And what happens at Cumby, on the profile view at Cumby, we can drop from 2006 down to 1008. So we'll be watching for that. DME distance looked good, 14.7. Has anybody actually done this approach in real life? I'm based really close to Martin State Airport, but I've never done this in real life. I've been to that airport, flown into the airport plenty of times, but never actually did this approach. First time in the simulator too, so we'll see how it goes. We're getting a little inside, so I'm going to delay that turn a little bit since I'm already kind of close. So I'll delay the 10-degree turn, but when that needle centers, I will give it a 10-degree twist. Actually, instead of only 10 degrees, our our next big waypoint is next big milestone, I should say, is that 021 radial. I'm going to go ahead and set that 021 radial. Let's just leave that there because I want to know in advance when that's coming, because that's going to tell me when to make my step down altitude. Right? That's the Cumby waypoint right here. So again, just see it coming up on that 021 radial. I'm going to hold that bold heading until I see 14.7, then I'll allow myself that 10-degree turn. That Baltimore's up top now. That's the nearest VOR. So we can go ahead and make our turn. Just monitoring the distance. Bang on 14.7, great. Now it's starting to come in, so I'm going to lead it a little bit. When the needle gets almost to the side of the donut here, I'm going to start my descent. Because I want to have started that descent before I start making the turn. I want to get that out of the way. It's going to be a little busy. So getting close, so let's bring the power back a little and set the autopilot for 1800, and we'll tell it to start dropping down. Next 400, 500 foot per minute descent is fine. And once that needle actually does come center, we can do our turn 10 twisting again. There it is, so here comes 10-degree turn. On the VOR. Altitude's coming down. $1,800. And distance looking great, 14.7. Perfect. Now, the next big item on here is Goves on the 039 radial. What that point is the final approach fix. You see it there in the Maltese cross. So maybe around that point they might actually turn us over to tower. So let's say, Cessna, Potomac, this is Potomac talking to me. Cessna, contact Martin Tower 121.3. So I'll go ahead and switch over, contact them. I'm already cleared for the approach. Tell me I'm clear to land runway 15. Here comes the needle, so we can get started on another 10-degree turn. 10-degree twist. But I'm going to set 039 because that was what Goves is identified as. It's the 039 radial here. Up on 1,800 feet, and it's going to be the same scheme, right? When this needle gets just to the side of the donut, I'm going to start my descent. I'm actually going to configure for the approach because that's my final approach fix. Still pea soup out there, so we might as well just keep our head in the dials. 14.7 for Baltimore. Now, what's my step down altitude next after this? The next point here is Zobap. It's 1260. So we'll set it as 1300 just to be on the safe side. And here that comes. So let's get started. Bring the power back. Bring some flaps in. I'm going to set 1300. Initiate a descent. And yep, I got my 10 degrees flaps, so we're configured for the approach. Needle, little 10-degree turn, 10-degree twist, Now what's ZOVAP, right? I need to know where that is. ZOVAP is the 047 radial. So well, if you can't see that. So let's set 047. That's going to be the point when I can descend down to the MDA, which finally is coming up, is 920. Coming up on 1,300 feet, which is the step down at ZOVAP. I'll momentarily bring the power back in, but it's not going to last long because we're coming up on ZOVAP. That's the point I can continue to descend down to my MDA. Quick check on the distance. We're a little close, so we'll correct it outside just a tad. Start down. Let's give it 1,000 feet. MDA is 920, but let's just a little on the higher side. Get the descent going. Now, the missed approach point is the 060 radial, which is the runway itself. So we'll have that set in. But now, once I get to my MDA, I should be able to get sight of the runway. Take a look at the outside the cockpit yet. But think about this, it's runway 15, so we're almost lined up with it. I'm gonna wait until I'm at 14.7, there it is, and then I'll make my turn a little bit closer. We're at the close enough to the MDA. I'm gonna pop my head out the window, or pop my head out the panel, and see what I can see. There's the runway right there. I can make my visual descent to land right here. I'm gonna hold off though. If you guys can see that, there's the runway down there. I'm gonna hold off because I actually want to go and do the missed approach here. So I'm gonna hold the heading, try to stay at 14.7 DME. And when we actually cross, let me see if I can get the outside. So that you guys can see the runway. There's the runway and identifier lights. Yeah, now that we're pretty close, we're very much too high out of position to make the approach to land. That's okay. I'm going to wait until I cross the radial at 14.7, and I'm going to execute a missed approach. What's the missed approach procedure? Again, starts with just a climbing right turn to 2,500. Just to make it easier, here we are at the missed approach point. I'm going to go ahead, turn off autopilot, full power, start my turn up to 2,500. Flaps are coming up, full missed approach mode here. And I want to intercept the 068 radial. So before I even touch any VORs, I'm just going to put 068 on the reciprocal heading. So I'm basically just going to roll out. 068 is on the bottom of my DG, roughly. I'll just hold that for now. Okay. Now the rest of the procedure has me climbing at 2005, so I'm gonna get ready to set my autopilot here. I'm gonna plug the heading. I am going to set 2005 as the altitude. 2005 is the altitude. Get the climb coming. Hold the heading. And I want to set up the 068 radial. Now again, let's be smart. We're not flying outbound on the 068 radial for the miss. We're flying inbound. I'll show you in a second. But what that means is that 068 is going to have to be at the bottom. Here's the plate again, right? Here's the 068 radial. We want to fly inbound. And we want to intercept, so in order to intercept, got to come left a bit. what we're looking for is the 11 DME. Because once we hit 11, we can start arcing in this direction down to our holding fix. We're almost there. We're at 12.3 now. So it's going to happen somewhat quickly. Close enough. I don't know that we're actually going to nail this radial before it's going to be time to turn, but basically I want to make a left turn to about a 160 heading. So let's go ahead and start that now. My 160, and I'm going to start arcing. So we're on the 068 radial. If I'm turning 10, twisting 10, I want to put not 068 but 078 on the head of the VOR. And right back on another DME arc. There we are. We should be at 11, so we're a little far away. So again, the station's off to my right. A little bit of a right turn to correct. Meanwhile, here I am over revving the engine since we leveled off at our altitude. Correct that. If I could use a co-pilot up here on this approach, a lot going on. Alright, so we're correcting nicely, 11.1 DME, or excuse me, yeah, 11.1 DME. Once that needle centers, we'll do another turn 10 twist time. And there it is, turn 10, twist 10. And what is it that we're looking for now? So the holding fix is post. It's 11 DME, which we're arcing on the 108 radial. So that's what we're going to be looking for. And what kind of an entry? And we can see from the chart here that it's going to be a teardrop. And what if we didn't have this at our disposal when we were just doing this? So remember, the outbound course is 108. So if we were to kind of draw that on here, 108 and it's left turns. All right, there's your racetrack. 108 outbound, left turns. We can kind of draw it on here and see that from the direction we're coming at it, we're really going to be looking to do a teardrop. So what does that mean? If 108 is the outbound and 101 teardrop, we basically want to add 45 to that. So 108 plus 45, was that 155, 153? About that quite yet though, because here comes the needle. It's going to be another turn 10 and twist it. And I'm going to go ahead and set the 108 radial, which again is how I'm going to define where post is. Still pretty good, almost right on the 11. Now, for this teardrop entry, right, I'm going to time 1 minute outbound. So I'm going to have my timer set up. Once I pass the holding fix post, I'm starting that minute so that I know when to start the turn inbound. Still 10.9. Since it's not really moving much, I'm not going to try to chase it. Just hold it like this for now. In fact, if we don't make any moves, we'll actually start to swing a little further outside. We're at 11, so maybe now I'll just kind of correct just a little bit to the right. So thinking about the turn again, it's a teardrop, so it's not going to be 108. It's going to be a little bit more to the right of 108. We can add 45, which means I'm going to want a left turn to about a 153 once I pass post. So that's what I'm anticipating when that needle centers. We're at 11 DME. Great. We're almost done with this approach here. One last thing is the entry to the VOR Hold. As if doing 2 DME arcs wasn't enough. I told you guys to see me sweat on this one. Here comes that needle. And let's start the turn. 153. Turn. Time for 1 minute. Twist. What are we twisting? It's the 108 radial, but but we want the inbound course. We're not flying inbound on the radial, or excuse me, we're not flying outbound on the radial. 108, we are flying. All right, so we've got 35 more seconds to breathe. So we're holding this until we get to the minute, and then we'll make another left turn coming around to try to intercept the inbound. So we've got the inbound package, the reciprocal of 108, about 278. That's our inbound. See if we can see anything today. So we're kind of out over the Chesapeake Bay right now. These little parts of Panama County, whatever that is over there. Nope. While we're doing our sightseeing, we missed our minute, so let's start our left turn. Okay, reset this. And we're looking to pick this needle up. Hopefully we won't undershoot or overshoot. Let's see how close we can get to that 278 heading. Don't see the needle coming alive yet, so I'm going to come a little bit more to the right of that. I want to, instead of flying a 278, I'm going to fly something more like a 300. See if we can actually intercept. We're at 13 DME, so we've got 2 miles to go to actually intercept the course here. Let's be a little bit more ambitious about going out and getting it. Hopefully we can make the needle come alive before we get to the 11. If we're lucky, maybe even get on course. This is a direct result of doing the sightseeing. We got a little wide on the turn. It's okay. The needle coming up, just barely starting to come in. So we're almost right on our holding fix, so I'm going to start my turn now. And we can just keep the turn coming all the way around until 108 our outbound. Actually, and I'm realizing we should have this set. It's actually probably a little closer than I thought I was, because I should have had it set right here. 108 should have been the outbound. Alright, so what we want to do, the 11 DME is the fix. So when we cross 11 again, we can start our minute outbound. That's when we're basically going to beam the station. There's no station here, right? It's just a fix defined as the DME. So at 11 here, we'll start timing. We'll wait a minute. We won't sightsee this time. Seconds away from the turn. start the turn. This time we've got the correct inbound course selected on the VOR. Pick up the needle. Looks like we might overshoot just a tad, but I think we've got plenty of room to make a correction. Just a tad left, so we'll chase it just a little bit. See if we can center it up as best as we possibly can. Reset the timer for the next outbound. And there we are, centered up. We've got a mile and a bit to go before the turn. So that's it, guys. That is the VOR 1.5 approach. They used to call the VOR DME, but it's the same thing, which is the different name. It's the VOR approach to runway 15 at Martin State. It involves a DME Arc on the final approach course. It involves a missed approach, which involves another DME Arc. And it involves a VOR Hold referencing a DME. So plenty of DME work in. It's usually one of those things that's references like, you know, one of the most peculiar approaches in the country. It's up there with the one at Aspen, the localized DME approach. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, load up the simulator, come on down to Maryland and try it for yourself. That's what it looks like. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. See ya.